Okay, so today I'm going to be looking at this book, which is the Summer Blades and Heroes, Advanced Summer Blades and Heroes, which is a skirmish game by Ganesha Games, Italian production, and it's something I've been playing for years, and I've never really sort of done an overview of to sort of work through how it works and how you might be able to play it. And I thought I'd do this really short. I'm going to do some more streaming later today, so kind of testing my setup's working okay. I thought I'll run through just the high level overview of this game, how the movement works, activation, and a little bit about combat, and do it kind of short and sweet. So I'll get stuck in with that. If I can zoom myself down a bit. So it's a nice little book. It's a skirmish style game. It's designed to run in a very small environment, so you could run it on as big a table as 4 foot by 4 foot, or you could go right down to 2 foot by 2 foot. So pizza box gaming you could do with this. The other thing about it is you could run the game as a very small sort of skirmish with just a couple of war bands, or it can be scaled up as well. And it's quite nice production in terms of the book. I'm not sure what version this is. I know they've done a few different versions. There may be a hardback, PDF, etc. And this was a sort of Kickstarter reboot of it a few years ago. And they've got a little bit of lore in there, as you can see, with some maps and geography, background, and introduction. But that's a short section of the book, just about 8 or so pages. And then you dive into the usual introduction, which is a general overview of how the gameplay works, how reactions work, and then some movement before it goes into combat. As you can see, the artwork's quite pleasing in there. It's quite sort of different, and it has these example ideas as well in there in terms of gameplay, so you've got some visual guides too. So what makes this unique? What's a bit different, and how does it work? So there's a few things which are worth mentioning. First of all, when you move figures, you use these rulers. You can make them yourself, or you can use sort of pre-made, or you could cut a piece of plastic or something to fit. So it doesn't necessarily dictate a certain ruler type, but they're of set sizes and essentially just a small, medium and long ruler. So I do them with these inch segment pieces that I've had for a while, which I use for other games for rulers and measuring, and it means there's just basically no tape measures involved in this at all. So that's the first quite interesting, unique feature of it as a skirmish game. No tape measurement. Everything is either at long range, medium range, or short range. And as a mechanic, it's quite interesting because that is both used for firing and shooting, and for the movement of the models as well. So as a very quick example before we go into any of the activation and things, if I have a model in front of me, when you're doing a medium move, which is a standard length move, you actually move from the front of the base to the back end of the base like that. So it's a one stick movement, which is always in that kind of linear direct fashion as well. So if there was any obstacle in the way here, you can only move up to that location. You couldn't move your way around an obstacle like you can do in most sort of more flexible style of game, but in this it's very much that direct one movement from the back to the front, which is in some ways, it kind of does vary the movement slightly. If you've got a large monster, it's basically moving from the front to the back of its whole base, which means it's going to move that a little bit much further. So I happen to have an example of that here. So if we were moving a medium-based monster, which would obviously have a different set of statistics as well and be a different build of creature, but you can see it's getting that little bit further out of its base movement because it's got a longer base in terms of how you do the front to back. So that's just something to bear in mind. But generally, as a rule set and as a skirmish set, it's flexible to be played with any miniatures and any base types. So potentially you could play against a friend that's got square-based models. You could have round, you could have the round lipped like I've got here, so they're slightly bigger again, the round lipped being sort of 30mm rather than 25mm in size. So you've got a whole load of different options in terms of basing, and model-wise you can use anything from your collection. It doesn't dictate. So if we have a look at the army lists at the back, you've got halflings, ratmen, swarms, minotaurs, undead, catfolk, Iris, humans, and quite a range of humans as well, sort of from a sort of barbarian type, where they've got some things like Snowwalk there, obviously it's one of their abilities. Dwarves, goblins, wood elves, orcs. So it's got all the usual high elves as well as the wood elves and lizardmen. People are, in terms of the game, Song of Blades and Heroes, it's very well supported on the internet anyway, so it doesn't take much to find someone that's done an army list for your favourite other game system or classical history type armies as well. And Ganesha Games have produced various other modules along this too. I've got a massive collection, Reese, but I do buy the Games Workshop models, plus anything. This is Steam Forged Games, this one here. They do a game called Guild Ball. This one is a plastic from, is it North Star? I can't remember quite the name of the company. But yeah, I pick up and I use different models. And this one's from a British company called, I can't even remember their name now. That's terrible of me. I'll try and think of that. I'll put it in the comments below, but I can't remember where I got that model from. But yes, I've got lots of models, and basically that's what's the convenience of this game system is you don't get locked into a model type. It'll fit any that you've got. So if you've got a bunch of half a dozen skeletons that you want to use, you can use this straight away. So let's dive into the rules. So I've got a little bit about the movement, which I've covered already. So yeah, essentially for the movement, as I said before, most things use the medium length stick for movement, but there's also, when you've built your ward party, you might have, I don't know, maybe let's just say for example we've got a war party of say 6 models on one side. Actually let's say we've got 6 here. So I've just picked up some sort of barbarian types. And as you play through and activate your squad, so if this was on your side, you'd have this war party together. You might have one leader and a special build for that, which is all detailed in the books as well. But when you actually activate individual models at a time. So it's not activating a whole group. You do an individual model. Now they may have an ability that allows them to force on some other models in the unit. So if you had a leader model on here, he may be able to say to one of the others when he activates, I'll push you as well because of his leadership ability. But on the whole, for most models and units, you activate one at a time. And when you activate it, you need to roll its quality. And the quality roll is a single d6. And if we have a look over at some of them in here, halflings have got quality 4+ for a normal militiaman, a village militiaman, right up to, let's just say, we've got a master thief or a thief, their quality is 3+. So the lower that number, the better quality they are. And when you make that roll to activate a model, so if I just take this one on the edge here, I want to activate it, I have to make a quality check to see if he'll do an action. And you get a choice here, and this is another absolute key fundamental thing to how the rules work and make it quite unique, in addition to the fact that you use the rulers rather than a tape measure, which is a fixed bracket of small, medium and large movement. You can also choose to, I want to activate that guy, you can choose to say I want to give him 1 action, 2 actions or 3 actions. So when you do that activation, it's a bit of a gamble, because if you fail on even one of these, you're passing a reaction back to the opponent. If you fail on 2 of these dice, you will potentially be passing the whole activation back to your opponent. So essentially, the sort of nearly risk-free way of activating this model is to roll 1 dice. And if its quality was 3+, I'd need a 3+ on the roll to make it activate. So that's going to activate that model. but there was nothing stopping me at the time to say I'm going to gamble a bit, I'm going to roll all 3, so let's see how that would come up, and that's a total fail. So with 2 dice underneath his quality of 3, that would pass the activation back to your opponent. So essentially I would have got hold of this guy thinking, right, I'm going to give him 3 actions. I really want him to do a move and then maybe another move and then hit something, but you only got 1, and then the go goes back to your opponent because you've got 2 failed activation dice in there. So that's activation in a nutshell. It's done by model. Some models, as I said, have things like leadership and other abilities that allow them to move a mob of models around them, but on the whole it's 1 model activating at a time, and a 6 is always a success and 1 is always a failure, but that quality of this one of quality 3 means I needed a 3+ to be able to activate it. So if I go scooting back to the combat now and just detail how that works, again it's very simple and quick. Just as with the movement, if I had, let's say, go back to this guy and I was lucky to get 2 successes with him, and then I have an enemy model to hand over here, with those 2 successes I could then move and attack. So I could take the medium ruler, which is the standard movement ruler for most sort of human-sized models. I can see already that it's closer than the ruler that I need to move it. I'd move in with that movement up to its distance to attack that model, and then that's when I do my attack roll. Again, the attack roll is 1d6, but with the attack rolls you get, the opponent gets a dice as well, because they're opposed attacks. So just shooting off into the attack page, just to give you a quick overview of how that works out. So to start with, there is a table of melee modifiers which are dependent on if you outnumber them, so you have a couple of models outnumbering the opponent, and also if you are attacking a prone model you get a plus on the roll as well because you're above them and you get that bonus. There's a few other things for ambushes, mounted combat versus people on the ground, a large model attacking a smaller model, so if you had a giant or something attacking it gets a bonus. And then there's a martial arts trait which with an unarmed minus on there as well. But generally speaking, the melee roll comes down to 1 single roll. So if I say this dark one is for the evil undead guy and I've got the lighter dice there, you then both roll at the same time or around about the same time. It doesn't have to be exactly simultaneous, but it's resolved simultaneously. Even though I'm making the attack, the defender gets to make a dice roll as well, because it's basically fending off the attack in a kind of a mutual attack backwards and forwards in that action. So as you'd roll, I roll for the attacker first, so it gets a 5, and then I roll for the defender, another 5. So they're both equal. If we have a look at just a random couple of stats for these, if I have a go back to that human section of the barbarians, let's give him, let's say he's something reasonably decent, so he's a commander, which means his combat would be 4. So I just add the combat to that, takes my result to 9 for the attacker. The defender is an undead, and we'll call it like something quite basic, like a slow zombie. His combat's only 3, so that's taken the combat dice roll up to 8. So I've beaten the defender. Now I haven't soundly beaten it because there's only that 1 difference between my result of 9 and the defender's result of 8. So if I have a look what that means, each fighting model rolls their melee, which I've done and added it to their C score, their combat score. If one model beats the other, the loser falls prone. If the winner's dice score is even, or recoils 1 base width directly away if the winner's dice score is odd. So basically what that means is there's essentially 3 results that can happen every time in a combat. You're either going to push the model prone, which means you could either mark it with a token to say it's prone, like this, put it on its side, or you are pushed back 1 base depth, like this, so that it separates the combat, because you've beaten it back strong enough that it's having to recoil away, which means you're now separated from it after you've completed your attack. Or if it was an even, because this was an odd dice roll, if that was say a 6, So it's still won by a 2 in terms of the combat result, because my 6 plus my 4 takes me to 10, and his 5 plus 3 would take him to 8. But because the dice roll was even, it would push it prone. And this is where this game then works quite neatly, because if you then followed up with another action to come in, you would get that +2 on the dice roll of the next combatant coming in. But that doesn't mean while it's scrabbling around on the floor, it's still not able to push back someone that's coming at it. So if this one came in and rolled a 2, plus say its combat of 3 up to 5, and this one then rolled a 6 plus its 3 up to 8, up to 9, it would push that model back. Actually, with an even, it's a knockdown. If the is even, or recoils one base width away from the attacker if the dice roll is odd, so it would be knocked down on an even roll, recoiled back on an odd roll. So that's basically the absolute bare basics of combating this. You essentially activate a model and then move it along. So if I just got a little ship over here, if I bring that out and just run through, maybe zoom in a little bit more to the models. Just happen to have a ship deck around beside me. So if this is a really nice MDF ship actually, they sell these on Etsy if anybody's interested. And they're magnetised, so you can sort of take them apart relatively easy for storage for games. Great for role playing or anything. But yeah, so if I had a few creatures of the sea or not of the sea, so these are undeads, and a leader for them up there, and a couple of models in the defence over here as well. So the premise again, as I just detailed there, zoom in and see if we can get into a bit better focus. So yeah, as we said, if we started out with this forces activation, I got to pick one of the models, and perhaps this berserker chap at the front here with the broadsword. That's a great sword, I think. I could then say, well, with that chap, I'm going to go all out. I want him to make 3 moves, 3 actions. So there we go, straight away. I've done the 2 failures, which means it passes back to the opponent. So I'd get to do his 1 action, and then the opponent would then have a go. So unfortunately, with 2 failures, if his quality is 3, and I've rolled both of these under his quality, that means the opponent can then take ownership of the round. And basically, the round ends when all the models have either activated or not done anything. Because if I activate a model at the back here, I don't have to necessarily move it. I can just say, well, I'm going to leave it in rear guard for now and not push it forward. But most of the time, you'll be moving things forward. So basically, he's got 1 move. So what do I do now? So I move him in, and I think I will. I'll sort of block things up. So I move him over there, but he's not got another action to do an attack. And because the opponent now has the activation, because I rolled 2 failures, it's going to activate this model over the backside here. And he's going to use 2 dice, gamble on 2 rather than 3. And with the quality, I'll say, of this skeleton is only 2, so it's only going to be, 4. So I'm going to need 4 pluses to activate. The higher the quality rating, the worse the model is. So I've got 1 failure, which can be a reaction, which happens straight away, and I've got 1 success. So in fact, I'm going to use, as the opponent on this side, I'm going to use that reaction to activate a model. So I'm going to activate this one with 1 dice, and I fail. So with that, she's not going to be able to move back, unfortunately. But this one's still got the 1 success on the 5+, so it's going to move itself up here. So you can see straight away the turn sort of bounces backwards and forwards sometimes between models, and because that skeleton didn't roll 2 failures on the dice, it's still the undead player's activation at this stage. So I'll pick another skeleton at the back and roll another 2 dice for that. Unfortunately, 2 failures. Again, with a quality of 4+, that's a very poor quality sort of skeleton, so you're going to quite often roll underneath. So 2 failures means straight away this team get to activate again. This one tried to activate already, so basically I've got a warrior here already engaged. I shall use their activation. I'm going to roll 2 dice, and we'll say the quality of this unit is 3+. Obviously all that would have been statted out before you. I'm just making this up to sort of give you a very basic demo. So I said 3+, I've got 1 activation and 1 reaction. So we're going to have a reaction used by the opponent to just try and do a strike with this character here. So I'll roll 1 dice for that undead to react, and that fails. So he gets his 1 attack in here. The reaction from the undead failed anyway, so he's got a normal attack. So again, we'll roll the attack roll, and we'll say we've got a combat of 4 versus a combat of 3 from the skeleton. So combat 4 up to 7 for the attacking barbarian here, and for the defending skeleton, combat of 2. So because it's odds, as I said before with the attacking, when you do that attack, if it's an odd dice, if the die score is odd, it's pushed 1 base width away. So I beat it and it's pushed a base width back. So that's basically a quick activation. These have all tried. I'm still on this guy's go. I'll move on to the one at the back and attempt an activation with 2 dice there. So that's with a quality of 3, that's 2 successes for that barbarian, which means it can now move and it can make an attack. So I'll move it through its friendly here, over to the back side, and then I'm going to do 1 attack because I rolled the 2 successes on the dice. So again, the defender always gets to fight back. So hers is not great. That one's even worse. So as I was saying, the barbarians have quality 4, so that's up to 6, and the skeletons, no, combat 4 up to 6. Skeletons and combat 3 takes it up to 4. So I've still beaten by 2. The only way you kill is if the winner doubles the loser, and the loser then goes out of action, is removed from the tabletop. So that's a real shame, because on a 1 versus my 2, if I'd had a 6 up here, I would have doubled this skeleton here, and it would have been wiped out. But you can increase the odds of that, because if I was to go into the next round, you can start to bring in the outnumbered bonus. That was I rolled a 2, so that was even. So that skeleton's actually knocked down after I beat that. So any other attacker against that skeleton would now be on +2 as well. So Reese, yeah, I mean, a lot of people do use these for solo play because of this to and fro of the turn activation. And yeah, essentially because the models have that sort of inbuilt activation where you roll and gamble on those 3 dice, you have a sort of way of pushing back to the opponent if you're playing solo play, because you can then see the activation turn go back to the other enemies. They can make some moves and attack, and you can come up with some really basic rules, which lots of people have. If you search the internet for Song of Blades of Heroes solo play, you'll find a lot of people doing it. And they've built some house rules around how you would then send that attack back in, based on it being your opponent's kind of slightly automated approach. But in many ways, the dice activation is what wins it for solo play, because you can guarantee that at some point or other you're going to try and move a model to an attack, and you'll roll 2 failures, and then it flips back to the opponent's turn to activate a model, which makes it a little bit more dynamic than a sort of traditional play. So yeah, I'd give it a go for sure. So I was trying to keep this one really short, and I've done 24 minutes, which I think is just a reasonable taster of this without diving into all the abilities. I mean, that's one thing just to mention on the exit here, is that the way you differentiate all of the different characters in here is that they have special sort of tagged like abilities like Fearless, Easy Target, Entangle, Fragile, Good Shot, Greedy, Free Disengage. So they have sort of loads of little extra things that can be attached to the different types. I mean, on the most basic sense here, in the giant lizards and things, they have Forester. So imagine if we have a look what Forester means. Probably means they can move through forests at full speed, or Foresters suffer no movement reduction from crossing woods of any kind. So yeah, you get that kind of thing. Gang is another one. This trait may be assigned only to models with a maximum quality of 4 and a combat of 2. So this means for a weak gang, they can gang up and perform group activations. So essentially for that low quality group, they move and fight as a gang instead of one model moving at a time. Yeah, and the other thing is about the leaders. Every force needs a leader, and if you fight within a certain range of a leader, if I just find the leader trait to tell you about that. Leader, any friendly model within one long distance of a leader, so you'd use the long distance ruler, although that's my long distance ruler. Any friendly within that long distance would get a +1 if they're near their leader or model which has the leader trait. So there's some real interesting ways to sort of boost it up, which takes it beyond it just being a basic add your combat dice. You've got a little bit more tactics to say, I've got to move in my leader to a certain range to be able to support the troops. But there's also lead from the front, which means it's another trait you can get, which gives more of a bonus if the leader then engages too. So you can sort of mix it up depending on how you build the units. All the models you can build your own stats for. You don't have to use the pre-gen ones in there. I tend to just go for the pre-gen because it's nice and easy just to get to a game quickly. Okay, so that was Summer Blades and Heroes, the advanced version, and a very brief overview. So thanks for watching. I'll stop my stream now and have a good day. Cheers, thanks.